If you have ever struggled to make your character actually move properly using a state machine, this video will fix that. In part 2 of this series, we are building the MoveState class, inheriting it into a new state, and writing everything directly into our animation system so your character finally start behaving like a real game character. Huge shout out to Hector23 for supporting on Patreon. Your support means a lot. And if you want access to this project full source code plus exclusive perks, check the link in the description. Now let's jump in and build this step by step. So let's get into this tutorial. We already have those script, which is state, entity, and the state machine class. So if I navigate to my project tab, assets, then script folder, then navigate to my underscore script folder, you can see we have the entity class, state class, and the state machine. And this from this state class, we just gonna inherit, we're gonna create multiple state. And let me show you the diagram once again. So if I open up the diagram, so this is our state class. You can see we're gonna have idle, work, detect, charge. So let's talk about the work now, or you can think of it the move state. So we're gonna create a move state script which just gonna handle moving our enemy. So it's gonna make this enemy to move. So we will create that script in order to move this enemy. So let's create that. And before I create that, I'm just gonna recap some things. So if I open up my state script, this enter state function get called when we're gonna enter to that state. Let's suppose we want to move our enemy, so we're gonna enter to that move state. So this function we're gonna call, and we're gonna call at a one time, just one time, once we're gonna enter to that state. And this exit state function just gonna get called when we're gonna exit from that state. Let's suppose we want to move, we just want to navigate to our ideal state from this move. And this enemy, let's suppose this enemy just move it over to idle state, means that we gonna exit from that move state. So this function just gonna call when we're gonna exit that state, you can see. And also we just setting the parameter in order to play the ideal animation clip or whatever state we just gonna enter in the next. And we have we have this logic update function, and we're gonna call this over again and again because we just want to move the enemy every single frame to the left or right direction every single frame. And you can think of it, this is our update function which we're gonna call over again and again. And this physics update function you can think of as a fixed update function, which also gonna call every single frame. And the do checks function over here in the bottom we make, it's gonna check, and we calling inside this logic update functions, you can see. And we can call it inside this physics update as well. Means this do checks function just gonna call over again and again as well, because we calling inside this logic update. And we want to reuse the do checks function once again to our inherited class. So we just want to reuse it. So what we have to do, we need to mark this function as a virtual void instead of just simply calling public void to checks. So we need to mark this function as public virtual void, means that we can reuse this function once again. Now I'm gonna save my script and let's navigate to Unity editor. So let's create a move state function first. Sorry, not a function, basically the script. So let's navigate to our project tab, assets, and then script folder. Then I will navigate to my states folder, right click, create mono behavior script, and you can name it to something like MoveState. I already created a script called MoveState. I didn't call it something like enemy 1 MoveState. Let's suppose you have multiple enemies. You have enemy 2, you have enemy 3, then you have to create like enemy 1 MoveState, enemy 2 MoveState, enemy 3 MoveState, and the list just goes on. So instead of doing that, I just created a MoveState class, and then we're gonna create a enemy one move state just like that, we're gonna call it. So that is the reason we just created this move state class instead of creating directly a enemy one move state. And from this move state class we can just create other script called something like enemy one move state, and that class just gonna inherit from this MoveState class. So let's quickly open up this MoveState class by double clicking on it, and we can go ahead and remove this start and update function, and we're not gonna inherit from this mono behavior script. Instead we're gonna inherit from this state class that we created. And now we have to generate the constructor that we created this state class. Means that we're gonna access all of the properties inside this state function, you can see, and we inheriting from this state class. Means we can reuse these functions, we can reuse all of this. And if I go over to my move state function, now we have to generate the constructor that we created inside our state class. To generate the constructor, you can just right click on this name of the script, which is in our case move state, then click on this quick action and refactorings, then click on this generate constructor in the bottom, you can see. Or you can simply hold down control plus full stop, and you can just get that generate constructor. And now we created the constructor, we generate the constructor, you can see. And now we just want to reuse this function. We want to reuse this logic update, we want to reuse physics update, enter state, exit state, and the list just goes on. And we inherited from this state class, means we can just access all of it. So let's go over to our move state class, and now we're gonna reuse those function. To reuse those function, basically click on name of the class. So in our case that is our move state, and then we're gonna hold down control plus full stop, and then we're gonna click on this generate overrides in the bottom, and then we're gonna uncheck the get hash equals get hash to string, and we want to reuse this interstate function, exit, logic update, physics update, and the do checks, and we're gonna click on this OK. Means that we can just add top of those function whatever we want. So since we want to move our enemy, so what we're gonna do now, to move our enemy, we're gonna make a move function, and we're gonna make the move function inside our entity class. So if I go over to my script folder and underscore script folder, I have the entity class inside there, you can see. And inside this entity class we're gonna make the move function, and that move function basically just gonna move this enemy to the left or right direction. And we're gonna call the move function inside this move state class, because this move state is just gonna handle moving our enemy, this enemy. So we can call the move function inside that move state class. So now we're gonna open up our entity class, and why we're gonna do it entity class, because this entity class just gonna sit on an every enemy game object. Let's suppose you gonna have enemy 2, so you also want to move your enemy 2 game object or enemy 3. So that's why doing inside our parent class would be grateful, and we can just inherit from that. Means that we can just use those properties once again, we can just reuse them, and we don't need to make from scratch. So that's why we're gonna make the move function inside this entity class, and this entity class just gonna sit on every enemy game object. So let's open that up by double clicking on it, and let's make a move function. And we need to make sure that we make that function as public, because we're gonna call the move function inside this move state class. So that is the reason. So let's go over to entity class, and now we're gonna make that function as public, and we can make it virtual. But since we don't want to reuse it over again and again, basically we don't want to reuse this function, so we can simply just leave it as void, public void, and let's call it something like move enemy or move, just like that. And then first bracket and some curly brackets, and this function over here in brackets, it's gonna take the speed parameter, basically with how much speed we just want to move. So and that will be a float type, so we're gonna by type float, and we can call this one move speed. So let's call it move speed, just like that. And later on you have to remember that you replace this move speed with a real number. You can replace with 4, you can replace with 5, you can replace with 4.5, and the list just goes on, basically with how much speed you just want to move this your first enemy or second enemy. And to move that, what we're gonna do, we're gonna go to transform of our enemy, then we're gonna use this translate function. and this translate function in brackets, it's gonna take the direction in which direction you want to move. So since I want to move this enemy to the left direction, so I can simply use this vector2 dot left. It's basically means -1 in the x, means it will be negative direction. So this enemy will start moving to the left direction, and in the y it will be 0, because we don't want to move in the y axis. So that's why we pass there vector2 dot left. It's basically means -1 in the x and y in the 0. And also we need to multiply this with our move speed, so we can just move it a little bit faster. The parameter that we put it over here, you can see. So now we're gonna multiply our direction with our move speed, and also we need to multiply with time dot delta time to make it frame rate independent. So let's multiply with time dot delta time and then close that up with semicolon. What we doing simply over here, first thing we going over to transform, means we going over to this first enemy transform component you can see in the inspector, and then we using the translate function in order to move our enemy. Now we have to call this move function, and when we're gonna call it, we're gonna call it inside our move state class that we created. So we're gonna open up our move state script, and we have it over here. So let's open that up by double clicking on it, and we're gonna do it inside this logic update, because this logic update we just want to call every single frame, and every single frame we just want to move this enemy or this first enemy, you can or you can simply assume this enemy. So there we just want to call it, and to call it we need a reference to this entity class, then we can access or we can call this move function, which we already have it inside our a constructor. As you can see, we have the entity class, you can notice inside this constructor that we generated. So what we can simply do, we can simply go over to our entity, and then we're going to access the move function, or we simply calling out the move function, you can simply say. And now we have to put our move speed. If you want to move your enemy with 4 unit of speed, so then you can just pass over here 4. So since I want to move my enemy with 3.5 unit, so 3.5 if I'm gonna put, and then close that up with semicolon, and make sure you press down Control S, and also go over to your entity class and then press down Control S to save your script. So what we simply doing, we basically going over to this entity class, and then we calling this move function, and we do know what move function is really doing. It's just moving this enemy to the left direction. You can see inside our move state function we just done that thing over here. And now what we can do, we what we have to do, we need to make a enemy one move state class in order to move our enemy. So let's create that. So we're gonna create another script for this first enemy. Let's assume you just gonna have second enemy, then you can create a enemy to underscore move state class, something just like that. So since this is my first enemy, so I'm gonna create another script, and that script just gonna inherit from this move state, means we can reuse whatever we're doing inside this move state class, we can just reuse them, and we do know what we're doing inside this move state script. So for this first enemy we're gonna create a script for it. So let's navigate to our project app once again, then assets, and then we will head over to our script folder, then enemy one folder I created. So you can create a folder something like enemy one if you have first enemy, and if you have second enemy then you can create a folder something like enemy 2. And this is our first enemy, so I'm gonna right click, then create mono behavior script, and you can name that script to something like enemy one move state. If you have second enemy then you can call it something like enemy 2 underscore move state. Because this is my first enemy, I already created a script called e1 move state. You can see over here e1 referencing over here first enemy or enemy 1. So I'm gonna open that up by double clicking on it, and I'm gonna go ahead and I will remove this start and update function and also this mono behavior. Instead we're gonna inherit from that move state, means whatever we just want to whatever we doing inside this move state class we just gonna reuse them. and we just moving our enemy over here, you can see. So we're gonna inherit from this move state. So let's navigate to our e1 move state class, and let's inherit from move state. We're not gonna inherit from this state class because we want to move. So we need to inherit from move state, because inside that move state class we're moving our enemy. So we're gonna inherit from this move state, and now we need to generate the constructor. So let's press down control, then full stop, then generate your constructor. And also we want to reuse the function because we need to move our enemy. So we need to reuse this enter, do checks, and all of these functions. So let's go over to our that script and to reuse them. So just click on the name of the script, then hold down control and full stop. Let's click on this generate overrides in the bottom, and we're gonna uncheck the equals get hash to string, and we will reuse this function, which is do checks, enter state, exit state, logic update, physics update. And let's click on this OK. And now we just created. And now what we have to do, we need to create the object of this script. We basically created this script. Now we need to create the object of it. To create that, now we can create another script. So let's navigate to Unity editor. So we created a entity class, and we do know that that entity class just gonna sit on an every enemy game object. And also we're gonna create a enemy one script. Why? Because this is our first enemy, so that is the reason. Let's suppose you have the second enemy, then you can create a enemy two script. And if you have third enemy, then you can create a script called enemy 3. And we're gonna inherit from entity class. So if I show the diagram, so this is this entity class, you can see this just gonna sit on every enemy game object. And from this class we just want to inherit. So we're gonna create a enemy one script for this first enemy. So let's go over to project tab, then assets, and let's navigate to our script folder, then script, then enemy underscore one, right click, create mono behavior script, and name it to something like enemy one. And I already created a enemy one script, you can see. So we can simply open that up. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna remove this start and update function, we don't need. Instead we're gonna inherit from that entity class. So if I navigate to my entity class, you can see. So I just want to reuse all of them. So I don't want to this one, where I want to just reuse this start and update function. And we just gonna inherit from this entity class, means whatever we're gonna do inside this entity class, we can access any of them. So we're gonna go over to our enemy one script, and instead of inheriting from mono behavior, we're gonna inherit from that entity class, because that entity class we do know what we're doing. And we just inherited from this entity class, means we can access anything we want inside this entity class. So since we want to reuse the start, and we want to reuse this start and this update function, so we need to mark this function as public virtual void, so we can reuse them inside our inherited class, inside our enemy one, you can see. So now we will go over to our entity class, and we're gonna mark this function, this void update, we're gonna mark as a public virtual void, means we can reuse them. And let's do the same thing with our start function. So let's make a public virtual void, and now we can reuse them. But before you do that, make sure you press down Ctrl S to save your script, and then I will navigate to my enemy one script, and then we can reuse them. And to reuse, we do know we basically need to click on name of the script. Let's hit Ctrl plus full stop, and we're gonna click on this generate overrides in the bottom, and then we're gonna reuse the start and the update function. So we're gonna uncheck this get hash equals to string, and then we're gonna use the start and the update function. So we can save our script, we can move over to Unity editor. Now we're gonna choose our enemy underscore one in the hierarchy. Let's select the enemy one and drag it over to this add component. We can select the entity class, and we can drag it over to this add component. We're not doing because this is our first enemy, and from this enemy basically we just inheriting from that entity class, means whatever we're gonna do inside that entity, we can just reuse them inside this enemy one. So we just attach our enemy one, and if we go ahead play our game, you will see this enemy not gonna move at all. Why? Because we just created that move state class, which is enemy one move state. So we also need to create a object of that script, and we need to do it inside this enemy one or inside that entity class. So we're gonna do it inside this enemy one because we just want to move our first enemy. That is the reason. So just wait a moment and you will see this enemy not gonna move at all. So this enemy is not moving at all, you can notice. So what we need to do, we need to get out of play mode, and if I open up our enemy one move state script that we created. So what we basically have to do, we need to create a object of this script, and we're gonna do it inside that enemy one script, because this enemy one we can see we attach to this enemy game object, so we can just move this enemy. So let's open up the enemy one script by double clicking on it. And now what we have to do, we basically need to go to top of our class, and we need to create a object of that script, which is in our case that will be e1 move state. So what we need to do, we basically need to mark as public. So make sure you mark as public, because later on we need to change the state. Means if this enemy is moving and suddenly we just want to stop this enemy, and we want this enemy to be played idle, then that means we need to stop this enemy. So that why we need to mark this public, and we have to do it for all, like for mobile. Once we're gonna create the idle state, once we're gonna create the attack. So once we are attacking, that means we need to stop our enemy to move. So that is the reason we just making this public. And then we need to type of the class, which is enemy one. So in my case, that is e1 underscore move state, and we can call this one move state. So let's call it move state, and then close that up with semicolon. And now we will go over to this start function. So this start function get called at the beginning of our game. So in the start of the game, we need to initialize all of the variable. So what we have to do, we basically need to type move state, basically name of the script as we name it, which is move state. And then we need to set equal to a new e1 move state, and then we need to make these brackets and then close that up with semicolon. Basically we're just creating a object of those script that we created inside this move state. And this e1, as you can see, we need to put the value that we created the constructor. So if I go over to my e1 underscore move state class, so as a first thing, you can see it's gonna take the entity class, and second thing, it's gonna take the animator component, and the third argument, it's gonna take the anim bool name, and the sorry, 1 2 3 4, as a fourth argument, it's gonna take the state machine. So let's go over to our enemy one script, and let's pass inside this bracket one by one. So this enemy one class inheriting from this entity class means we can pass itself, because it's inheriting from this entity class. So we can simply pass this basically means it just referencing the entity or this enemy one class itself, because we inheriting from this entity, as you can see. So we can access any of this. So as a first argument, we just pass this, and the second thing, it's gonna take the animator component. So if we move over to Unity editor, so we need a reference to this animator component of this enemy, so we can switch the animation clip of this enemy, like moving, attacking, charging, or idling. So we need a reference to this animator component. So let's grab it. So let's go to top of our class, and let's make a variable for that. So we're gonna make a serialized field, and I'm gonna explain that. Serialized field private, and the component that we're looking for is an animator. So we're gonna go over to animator, and let's call it animator, just like that. And we're gonna close that up with semicolon. Even though we just marked as private, so we're not gonna able to see underneath this enemy one script. However, we just marked as a serialized field. So even though it's private, now we're gonna able to notice underneath our enemy1 script. So that is the thing. So now as a second argument, we can pass our animator component of this enemy. Means you can simply assume this animator component of this enemy. And the third argument, it's gonna take the bool name. So we want to play the move animation clip. So I just want to create a move parameter for that. So I'm gonna choose my enemy underscore one in the hierarchy. Let's navigate to animator component, and if you're not able to find animator component, then come to the top of your window, in the top bar window, then animation in the bottom, and you can see the animation and the animator. So we're going to create a parameter for our move. So we can just do that. For now, let's leave it. So let's go over to our script and make sure you do it inside quotation, and you have to pass the parameter name. So I'm going to pass move just like that, or you can just name it whatever you want. And the fourth argument, we need the state machine, and we created the state machine class, which is responsible for switching our state and initializing our state, you can see. So we need to create a object of this script as well. So let's go over to our enemy1 script, and let's make another parameter for our state machine. So let's make a public, and that is a state machine class that we're looking for. Let's call it state machine. And then we will move over to our state start function, and we need to set our state machine. So we're gonna set our state machine equal to a new state machine. Now we have the reference of that basically object out of that state machine script, basically this one we have. And now we can switch the state machine, sorry, we can switch animations. So as a fourth argument, I'm going to pass this state machine by now. So let's pass their state machine, and that's all we need. And that's all we need. And if we go ahead, save our script, then move over to Unity editor, we should see this enemy just gonna move. But however, it's not gonna do at all, because we also need to initialize our state that we created our inside our state machine script. So just wait a moment and you will see. Now the compilation is almost done, and if we go ahead and then play our game, you will see this enemy not gonna move at all, because we also need to initialize state. We created the function inside our state machine script, so we also need to call that in order to initialize our state, or which state we just want our enemy to start with. So since we want to start with move, so if we go ahead, we can see this enemy is not moving at all, because we need to initialize the state. So if I get out of play mode, move over to my state machine script, you can see we created this function called initialize state. So we need to call it, and we do know what this function is really doing. It's just going over to the current state, basically what state we just want to initialize. So since we want to initialize with the move one, so we can pass inside move, and we basically need to replace this one. So let's go over to our enemy one script, and now we need to call it. So to call it, so a function we need to call it, which is initialize. So the first thing, we need to go over to our state machine class. So let's go there, and then we're gonna call the function which is initialize state, then close that up with semicolon. And now this initialize state in brackets, it's gonna take the state which state you just want to start with. So since we want to start with moving, so we can pass the move state in brackets, which is we have it, we just created over here. So now we need to put there. So let's put our move state, because we just want to just want our enemy to move in the start of our game. And now if we save our script, hit it again to Unity editor, it's not gonna work at all, even though we just initialize the state. And also we need to remember that we just drag the reference animator, and we can notice underneath our enemy one script animator, and it says none animator, means empty. So we're gonna take our animator component, and we're gonna drag it there. So let's select our animator, let's drag it there, and if we go ahead, play our game, and indeed we're not moving at all, And if I move over to my console tab, we can see move does not exist mean we need to create a move parameter inside this animator. So what we will do, we will get auto play mode. So from this idle we just want to move. So what we can do, we can just make this one as a default one, or we can just right click on this idle boss, then click on this make transition to work, because in the start of the game I want to play the animation clip of moving of this enemy. So that's why I just made the transition from this idle to our work. And we need to create a parameter, and this side should be type this, which we pass it over here once we created the move state object script. You can see we created the object out of this move state script. So now what we need to do, we need to create the parameter. So inside this animator tab we can see parameter. Let's click on this plus icon, and that will be bool parameter, because we, if we move over to our state class, we can see this animator we using this function which is called set bool. So that's why we need to use the bool parameter instead of anything else. So let's click on this plus icon, then bool, and we have to make sure we spell it correct, which is move. So now we're gonna choose the transition from this idle of this enemy, from idle to our work or move. Select the transition, go over to inspector, and we're gonna uncheck the has exit time as well as transition duration to 0. And now we're gonna choose that condition. So let's click on this plus icon, and we will choose if our move is true. Now it's gonna do that thing. So if we go ahead, and you will see as soon as our game just gonna start, this enemy gonna play the move animation clip, because we just made the transition from this idle to our move, and we have chosen that move, and we need to make sure we just spell it correct. So go over to your enemy one script, or the script that you created, or where you just created an object out of those scripts. So in my case this enemy one, and I can see we just name the parameter, or we just pass as a third argument the parameter name is a move, which is you can see inside this quotation, and you need to spell it correct. And we just made it move. So let's go ahead, play our game, and you will notice as soon as our game just gonna start, you will see this enemy just gonna play this move animation clip, because we're setting in the start when we entering to a animation state. Then we just setting that parameter to true. And indeed we can notice we just playing the move of this enemy, and it's playing over again and again. However, this enemy is not moving at all, because we need to call the logic update function. So we need to get out of play mode, and if we move over to our enemy one script where we just created this move state. So if I go over to my enemy one move state, and basically the move state function class, you can see we create we just calling this entity.move, and we do know what it's really doing. So we also need to call this logic update function inside that update function inside this enemy one, inside this update function. So that logic function of logic update function just gonna call every single frame. So, and we do know what this logic update function is really doing. It's just going over to entity class, means you can think of this enemy one or entity class of this enemy, and then moving our enemy. So if I open up my entity class, you can see it's moving our enemy over here. So we also need to call the logic update function, or logic update function inside that update function. So we're gonna move over to our enemy one, and we're gonna call it over here inside this update. Why? Because this update function runs every single frame, and we need to move this enemy every single frame to the left or right direction. So that is the reason we need to call it there. So let's call the function over here. So we're gonna call the function. To call it to call the function, what we need to do, we can basically we can go over to our state machine, then current state, then let's call it the logic update, and then close that up with semicolon. Means we calling the logic update. What we doing, first thing we just going over to this state machine class, and then we going over to this current state, or what state we are in. So in the start of the game we are in move state, we do know of this enemy. So move state, you can think of we just going over to move state, move state. So in my case this is move state, and then calling the logic update function, as you can see. And we do know what logic update function is really doing. It's basically moving our enemy, you can see. So you can take a look once again. First thing, we going over to state machine class, then the current state. So in our case that will be move state, because we initialize our move state, you can see. And then we calling the logic update, means this function, this logic update. Or you can just go over to your e1 underscore move state, and then calling the logic update function, and we do know what it's really doing. Now we can save our script. And if we move over to Unity editor, so now what we're gonna do, if we go ahead and then play our game, we should see this enemy just gonna start moving to the left direction, because we calling the logic update. And we do know once what we're doing inside logic update, we calling the move function, and it's making our this enemy to move. And indeed we can notice this enemy started moving to the left direction, but it's moving to way faster. So we're gonna get out of play mode. And if we move over to our move state class, we can see we just moving with this amount of move speed. So instead of doing this, we're gonna create a variable for it. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a scriptable object. You can think of a scriptable object is a data container. It's gonna contain some value, and we're gonna put it over here. To create that, first thing, navigate to Unity editor, then go over to your project tab, then go to assets, then a script folder, or you can just make it anywhere. So I'm gonna make it my data folder, then right click, create, then go over to scripting, and a scriptable object script, and name it to something like move state data. I already created a script called move state data, you can see. So we're gonna open that up, and it's not gonna inherit from mono behavior, because it's not gonna sit on any game object. And we have the part, we can create that data. We have the part. If you want to change the part, you can do it. So I just want to rename this one. So I'm gonna call it something like move state, instead of calling move state, move state, move state, move state data. And I'm gonna call it move data, just like that. Basically we just specified the part inside our assets, and now we can just give it a value. So we're gonna have the move speed, or with how much amount of speed we just want to move. So we're gonna make a parameter for it. So let's make a public float, and we can call it something like move speed. And by default I'm gonna give a little value, something like 1.5f, and this amount of speed I just want to move with. But however we can play around with this number, because we just made it public. So we can notice underneath our inspector, and we can save our script. And then if we navigate to Unity editor, we can create that data, and we specified the part where we can create over here. So what we basically have to do, we need to move over to Unity editor, then go over to your project tab, then you can just right click, and now we can create that data. To create that, what we have to do, we basically need to move over to this project tab, assets, then right click, create, and in the bottom you can see move state data, and we can see inside our script, which is the path, which is move state data, then move state data, then move data. So we can go to our assets, let's right click, create. In the bottom we can see move state data, then move data. So we can click on it, and we can see it's just created, and we can call it move data, just like that. Let's call it move data. And if we go over to inspector, we can see move speed that we created inside that script, which is 1.5, and we made it public, so we can adjust it over here. So I'm gonna leave with 1.5. So we need a reference of this move speed, basically this move data. So we can just change with this move speed that we created inside this script. So instead of putting a manual value, we're gonna put that move data. So however we need a reference of this move data, so we're gonna put it inside our constructor. So we're gonna have the reference of it. So let's go to our script, and we're gonna do it inside this move state, not inside this state class, because this move state class is responsible for moving our enemy. So that is the reason we're gonna create it over here. So let's go to top of our class and we're gonna make a protected, and we do know what protected does. Basically we can access this protected parameter in from inherited class, means we can access it inside this e1 move state, because this e1 move state class inheriting from that move state class you can see. So now we're going to create that. So let's make a protected, and the data that we're looking for, or the script, so in our case that is a move state data, or the script name we need to pass. So in our case that is a move state data, and we can call it move data. So let's call it move data, and we also need to make sure we just pass inside our constructor, and we have the constructor over here. So at the end over here after state machine I'm gonna pass so we need to pass the script name, which is move state data, and we can call it move data. Basically we just what we're doing, we basically passing inside our constructor move data. And now we need to set that basically we need to take our move data and we need to put it over here. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna set this dot move data equal to our move data. Basically we're taking this move data, this dot move data referencing this move data, and we're setting equal to this move data, you can see. And now what we have to do, instead of putting manually 3.5, we're going to replace that. We simply just going to move over to that move data script or that move data, and then we're going to access the move speed, which is dot move speed. So what we're simply doing, we're just going over to this move state data class, or this scriptable object script, and then accessing this move speed, and the move speed we have by default 1.5. so this move speed right over here, it's gonna be 1.5, means our this enemy just gonna move to the left direction with 1.5 unit. But however we can play around with the move speed. So let's go to our script, and we need to make sure we press down Control S. If we press down Control S, then go over to Unity editor, we're gonna get some error, and let me show you. So just wait a moment. We're gonna get some error because we also need to change the enemy one move state script. And we can if we move over to our console tab, we can see we get a error message says there is no argument given that corresponding to. So if I double click on this message, we just open it up inside, and we getting the error inside this e1 move state, because we need to pass over here in constructor which is the move state data. So basically we need to change over here as well. So what we can do, we can simply remove that, or we can simply put manually something like over here move state data, then we can call it move data, and also we need to pass the move data as like you can see animator, anim bool name, and all of these things. So what I'm gonna do, instead of doing that, I'm gonna remove, and then I'm gonna generate my constructor once again. To generate, let's do it, let's generate our constructor once again. So we're gonna generate our constructor. So let's generate that, and if we generate, we can see inside our constructor the move data gets added. We have the move state data, move data, and the move data over here as well. Even though if we save our script, then navigate to Unity editor, we're gonna get some errors. Still we're gonna get some errors because we also need to change inside that enemy one. So if we go over to our enemy one script, we can see e1 move state. Now as a fourth argument, it's gonna take the move data, because inside that constructor we pass the move data inside this enemy one, you can see right over here, which is move state data, move data. So we need to pass out there. So as a fourth argument, e1 move state constructor, or this class, I'm gonna take the move data. So we can just pass our move data over here, but before we pass, we need a reference to our move data that we created inside our assets. So if I go over to my project tab, assets, we have the move data over here, so we need a reference to it. So let's go to our enemy one script and let's grab the reference. So let's make a serialized field private, and we're looking for move data, and basically the move state data class, and we can call it something like move data. So let's call it move data. And you have to remember, once you just move over to Unity editor, make sure you just assign that. So now as a e1 move state, over here as a fifth argument, one two three four, fifth argument, it's gonna take the move data. So let's pass out our move data as a fifth argument. Now we have the move data, state machine, move animator, and this. And if we go ahead, save our script, navigate to Unity editor, you will see now it's almost done. And if we select our enemy underscore one, go over to our enemy one strip, we can see move data, and it said non move state data. So what we need to do, which we created the assets which is move data, we need to drag it over to that slot. So we're gonna take our move data from this assets folder inside our project tab. Let's drag it over to this move data slot. Now we can see we have the move data. And if we go ahead play our game, you will see this enemy just gonna move towards to the left direction with our move speed. And as a move speed we have chosen 1.5, but however we can play around with that. We can make it 2, we can make it 3. It's totally up to you how much you want. So now if we go ahead and then play our game, we can see this enemy just moving to the left direction with that amount of speed. I'm gonna get out of play mode. And if you want your enemy to move even slower, then we can just double click on this move data underneath our enemy one script. So it's gonna open that up, and we can make the move speed something around 1.2 to make it less speed. And now if we go ahead play our game, our enemy just gonna move way slowly than before it was. So basically it's gonna move slowly as compare how much it was moving in the start of our game, that we have chosen the move speed. And we can see now it's moving way slowly. And if we increase this value, we can see it's moving little bit faster. So I hope you get the idea about this scriptable object. Basically scriptable object basically is a data type, or you can think of is a container which just gonna hold data, and you can just put it. So you can go over to your move state data, you can put as many value you want. You can just have something like chasing speed, you can have attack speed, and all of those you can define. So a scriptable object basically is a container, or it's a box where you can simply put variables or parameters. Or you can think of apples or bananas, everything just like that. I'm just giving you some examples of it. So that is the thing, that how you can make the move state.